behind me over there is a 1,500, almost 2,000 foot escarpment known as the Colorado Plateau. It's the second largest plateau on Earth. Extends from Sedona all the way east into New Mexico, west into Nevada, and north all the way to Wyoming.
I had no idea.
So the only plateau bigger than that is the Tibetan Plateau. The Colorado Plateau is arguably the single most beautiful natural feature on Earth. What nobody argues about is that it has the greatest concentration of national parks and monuments in the United States. The Grand Canyon is carved into it. Zion, Bryce, Arches, Canyonlands, Capitol Reef, Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon. Those are just the national parks, and there's I don't know, probably more than 100 national monuments. Just spectacularly beautiful landscapes. So plateaus are pushed up by pressure from underneath like mountains. The difference is that plateaus don't buckle like a mountain range would. So the Colorado Plateau was, at one time it was laying as flat as a sheet cake. There were no cliffs over there at all. And then one day pressure from underneath started to push the land up, and that rose just like the elevator went up, like a giant sheet cake, exposing and exhuming layers of rock that had been laid down there hundreds of millions of years ago. The oldest layer that you can see in the Sedona area, the red sort of sloping area that's right at the bottom of the red rocks, is called Hermit Shale. And shales are formed in shallow marine environments like swamps and marshes. So the Hermit Shale, at the time that was laid down here, this whole area looked pretty much like the Everglades. It was a shallow bay on the west coast of Pangaea. Pangaea being that time when all the continents on Earth were connected in one giant supercontinent. So this was a shallow bay on the west coast. Sitting on top of that is a series of alternating bands of red and white. That's a beachfront formation. Wherever it's red, it was just underwater, and wherever it's white, it was sitting just above the high tide. So you have those alternating bands. What geologists might sometimes refer to as a regression sequence. It refers to the oceans ingressing and regressing, coming and going, and leaving deposits. The land is also rising up and down at the same time. And then sitting on top of that is a thin gray band that runs around Sedona like a bathtub ring. It's anywhere from, about 6 to 10 feet thick in the Sedona area. It's called Fort Apache limestone, and that's the remains of a Great Barrier Reef. So eventually, as the land was rising and falling, creating that beachfront formation, eventually it sank and it got deep enough that a Great Barrier Reef formed. That Great Barrier Reef goes all the way north, just to Sedona, and it goes all the way south, way down into Mexico. So further south, you could find Fort Apache limestone that's 100 feet thick. Here it's only 6 to 10 feet thick, and the reason is the area further south was underwater for a much longer period of time. And then on top of that, you can see the big, thick, white layer that's on top. That's called Coconino sandstone, and it's the remains of a great sand dune desert that was perhaps the largest sand dune desert that has ever existed on our planet. Somewhat larger, a little bit larger than the Sahara is today. So those are windblown sand dunes.
Wow.
We can tell that because the rock is cross-bedded, has these sort of sweeping lines that run diagonally through it, and those lines are preserving the structure of the sand dunes. And then sitting on top of that is another layer of limestone. It's the little cap layer that you can see on the rocks behind me there. That's Kaibab limestone. That is an ocean floor, or it was an ocean floor. Now it's a layer of limestone sitting about 7,000 feet above sea level. Kaibab limestone is not only visible here, it is also the rim of the Grand Canyon. When you're standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon, you're standing on Kaibab limestone. So that's the kind of limestone that's formed in an ocean that's at least 200 feet deep. And what forms that type of limestone is all the little animals in the ocean that have shells made out of silica. When they die, their shells dissolve, and you get, at the very deepest part of the ocean, you get what's called marine snow. Looks like it's snowing down there, and it's just the skeletons and shells of animals that live up above slowly floating to the bottom. And when it gets to the bottom, it all kind of globs up, kind of like a silica gel, and then it gets compacted and pressed and turned into stone. And that formation up there is 170 million years old, so it's older than dinosaurs. No dinosaur fossils in that. But there are lots of fossils of things that you would have expected to find living in the ocean 170 million years ago.
The top.
At the very top.